Welcome to Do It Yourself Music Appreciation show where three old buddies, myself, Benny, my brother Dion, and my brother Gary, we get together once a week. We sit down, discuss, analyze, and appreciate a different album each week. We switch off week to week whose pick it is, and this week Dion had the pick of Kanye West's sophomore release called Late Registration. And Dion, if you want to take it away with an introduction. Good to see you guys.
So guys, another week, another week strong. How we doing, first of all?
Thank God, man. I really can't complain in this. It could be a lot worse.
True.
I never know how to answer that question.
Yeah, I know.
Especially in this situation. Dude, I'm hanging. Yeah,
we're hanging.
Exactly.
Like Ben was saying, I chose Kanye West this week, Late Registration. I kind of did that on purpose because I know, full disclosure here, I know for a fact that Ben isn't the biggest Kanye West fan in general, understandably for various reasons. But over the years, I had been lamenting how much Late Registration is a great album. It was a big album for me in college. Listened to it a bunch. Gary, I know you've had some experience with late registration too, right? Probably.
This has been part of the soundtrack to my life. Yeah. Hell yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, unless you've been living under a rock, Kanye West is a Chicago artist. He started off as more of a producer. He is a producer. I mean, whether you like him or not, the pretty much a fact remains that he is one of the top and incredible producer. Whether you say about his rap skills or not, that we'll get into a little bit. But as far as producing, I mean, this guy's been around since he was a teenager, doing stuff in Chicago. He did stuff with Goody Mob in the late 90s. And Kanye doesn't come from, he's not your typical rapper. And that, kind of had something to do with why he didn't have a rap career at first, why he started off with producing, because his parents divorced at 3, but his mom's an English professor, his dad was a photojournalist, you know what I mean, like he didn't come from like the hood, and I think that's a big reason why labels didn't want him rapping. They wanted to keep him as a producer, and that's why he got his rapping start sort of late, with Jay-Z. And of course, since he released his first album, College Dropout, which was great, and then the sophomore release, Late Registration, both hits. And since then, his music is kind of, it depends on what your opinion is. Some people may say it got a lot better at age, and some people say he sold out. I say it was a little bit of both, and then he kind of went a little bit crazy. I think actually a little sort of nugget that I have, I think that there is a strong hint in this album as to why he ended up sort of losing his sort of letting his mental state sort of deteriorate later on in life. I mean, it's kind of sad. Like, this guy has talent. Like, again, like whether you love him or not, you have to admit that the dude has talent, and it's just like it's kind of interesting seeing his life. I mean, despite the fact that he's a billionaire, like that doesn't matter. Like, clearly this guy's got issues. However, again, just bringing it back, Late Registration, it's still one of my favorite albums, and yeah. I guess we'll start off with this. Let's start with Gary, since Gary's actually listened to it more before. Gary, what did you think of your, once you did like your sort of deep dive this time around?
Yeah, right on. It's been actually a while since I opened up this album and listened to it straight through, right? It's been a while because this is an album that I'd listen to and I'd play it, and I think most songs on this album are just fucking jams. I would just jam to these. I love these songs. They're so energetic, and they were just, for me, it was in the middle of when I was in college, and that was a time that we listened to a lot of Kanye West. That was, following, I think his first release was a year or two before this.
A couple of years. I think College Dropout was 2003, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Right around the time we were like finishing high school and
exactly.
Stuff. Like, these were my jams. These were the jams in the background of every fun party, and I would love driving to these. I would take long drives and listen to this album. So it was the first time getting back into it in a while. And my first reaction was like, wow, I have played these songs 1,000 times. Yeah. They're so good. But then others, like Gold Digger, etc. Right? These are songs that are, you could say this is a song that's been played, not played out, but played enough. Right? I don't need to hear Gold Digger again. Yeah, but then there were songs on here that I loved getting back into, and we'll talk about individual songs later. But for example, I loved Drive Slow, right? That is just an amazing song. Yeah, yeah. Anyway, so let's get into the album a bit more. But like, yeah, I loved it. I love this being the assignment for the week.
Nice.
Yeah, and it's funny, Gary. You had that thought like, wow, I have played these thousands of times, and just about every song on this album. Again, I've never sat down and listened to this album. I've never chosen to put on a Kanye West album, admittedly, right? It's just not my bag, but like I've heard every one of these songs. You know what I mean? Like even the deep cuts, the ones that aren't radio hits, I've heard, whether it be at Dion's house or someone's house.
I was just about to ask where you would have heard them, but yeah, I guess that does make sense. I mean, the two of us, for example.
The truth of the matter about Kanye is that like whatever opinions I have, which will be expressed at some point during this, they're not all negative, but whatever keeps me from being a fan, quite frankly, there's no denying that he had a seismic impact on the world.
Absolutely.
Right? Like on popular culture. People who never heard him rap a lyric know who he is and hate him, or know who he is at least. You know what I mean? There's a whole bunch of people in my neighborhood who voted for a certain someone who like used him as a poster child for someone to hate until he started supporting that person. It's like he's like one of the most famous human beings that ever existed.
Of course.
And his impact on society as a whole is immeasurable. You know what I mean? Like, and it's so I heard his music my whole life. You know what I mean? I've just never chose to put it on.
Sure.
And I'll tell you, my first, I listened to this the whole way through twice this week, and then had it on in the background while I was working too, but not really paying attention.
Yeah.
So, I got my notes in, and my first thought of this album was, this is a production masterclass. Like this is this is like the epitome and like most professionally, like the equivalent of a Steely Dan record, which like, sorry, Gary, but like Steely Dan is known to be the greatest studio band ever, or at least the most meticulous, and their dedication to the perfect recording and like overproduction of their albums is notorious. You know what I mean? They would work musicians into the ground. Anyway, like this album kind of reminded me of like a slick Steely Dan level of production quality. So, and we'll go more into that. I didn't realize that he had a collaborator throughout the whole album.
Yes, which is interesting.
What's his name? John Bryan.
Yeah, the movie composer.
Yeah. And that, I mean, again, the other thought I quickly had was, man, like, I remember this is a significantly different sound than the Kanye West that most of the world is currently familiar with. Even though we're familiar with some mega hits from this album, there's a sonic continuity throughout this album that truly lives in the early 2000s, right? And it's a sound that made me go search the production credits, and I saw the name John Bryan, and I read a little further. So that what I love most about it, the album, is its variation in its beats, and I'm gonna leave it at that, but because I want to keep going, and I'll get back into it later. But those were my biggest takeaway, was how floored I was by just the overall production quality and like attention to detail and care to the craft, which you don't, especially these days with, I don't like trap music, I'll just admit it, and there a lot of it is like synth loops, which I just feel are so lazy, sorry to say. And this is not a lazy album. This was an album that clearly took a lot of work, planning, and dedication, and talent and skill. So I was impressed. I'll put it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. That's good. I did. Me and Ben chatted about something else earlier this week, and I just try to get a gauge of just seeing, hey, what do you think so far? I was like, is it better than you thought it was? And at the time, his answer was no. I think maybe you might have come around a little bit. I think
a little bit. Second listen, kind of, you know, open me up a little more. But you know, just quick, you know, snapshot of that is it's going to come down to his rapping, and I'll leave it at this. I don't want to spend the whole episode on it, right? But so I look at it, he raps like a producer who knows how to make a hit, right? His topics, sure. His topics, they span over a large range of, you know, political issues and, you know, family family appreciation and, to a lot of just flossing and telling the world how great you are. But like, you know, which is part of rap DNA. And, you know, he's never moved me. I appreciate how well he lands over the rhythm. He's never rap sloppy, right? I've heard people who are super complex and lyrical that maybe don't hit the right pocket. And when I'm listening, I'm like, I don't know, like this is like a little too all over the place. You know what I mean? He lands and rides the beat on every single track on this record, on this album. He is very in tune with the quality of, he's a songwriter. You know what I mean? And he produces pop songs, whether or not the topics aren't necessarily pop all the time. They're pop songs, and he's very good at it. You know what I mean? He's very good at it. But the raps never do it for me. You know, sometimes I even find myself cringing at some of the lines, like they seem lazy, or like, you know what I mean? Like I'm never impressed by his metaphors. You know, he doesn't really move me in that way. And that's what, you know, when it comes down to rap music, when the rapper at hand isn't spitting something that inspires me, moves me, or impresses me, then I don't usually gravitate towards it. And that's where I think, you know, removing all the drama, and I don't want to get into character assassination in this. I don't think it serves a purpose. You know what I mean? Because I got a lot to say on that too. But who gives a shit what I
honestly,
what I
a lot of his drama, the majority of his drama came well after
way later.
album,
well, so. I mean, he was already known as. I mean, I know that he was known as a very pompous. self. You know, the word that comes to my mind is hubris.
Sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just self. He
self-involved, like just
and thinks of himself as a god. You know what I mean? And I don't want to get into the mental illness. I don't want to get into all the things I don't much care for, but I just don't gravitate to his music because I don't find him to be a great lyricist, and I don't find his raps to be. I think if this album came out with one of the rappers who I thoroughly enjoy rapping over the beats and making it their own songs, not his songs, I probably would like it a lot more. Because I'll tell you, the beats are really great. You know what I mean? I love the soul samples. You know, he really, right there, you know, Ray Charles on Gold Digger, and his choice of samples is legendary, and his ability to flip samples into pop music is legendary. And John Bryan's contributions are really where I really felt this like, so like I'll just get into it if you don't mind.
No,
and then
please.
I'll turn it back over to you. So what I loved, right, what really moved me in this album, which I didn't realize about it until I actually sat down and actively listened to it, was I loved how he does something that most hip hop artists don't do, which is in the middle of the song switch up like maybe add an arrangement.
Yes.
The last verse. So the last verse, for instance, on.
I think I have an idea what you're gonna say.
Hold on. I have it right here.
I'll let you know if I was right.
The last verse on this song on Gold Digger.
Oh,
right?
I see. Yeah.
The last verse has he implements like a synth. I think was John. I think this is why he hired John Bryan, because he's got this composer now doing synth and string arrangements, right? So like there's like a horn synth sound only on the last verse. It's staccato. It's like bump 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 bump.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
And it totally changes the sonic landscape in the song. Now that type of shit, that's stuff that my favorite bands in the world, my favorite artist in the world, as you both know, is God Street Wine. They do that in their songwriting. Maybe like, you know, each verse they'll add a new layer to the chord. You know what I mean? Like a new thing to switch up the sound.
It's almost like a car driving along and like they're picking up new passengers, like from the beginning of the song to the end of the song. By the time you get to the end of the song, the car's full. and like everyone's
Exactly,
jamming
and
out.
that
Yeah.
truth be told, that's a rarity in hip hop. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? In hip hop, you know, even my favorite boom bap era, you find the loop, you find the samples, maybe the chorus has some switches, but to have the last verse have a new a new texture, you know what I mean, and a totally new, you know, set of notes hitting you on top of that was very impressive to me, and that really, I was like, whoa,
He does
okay,
this a
this
couple
is,
of times in this album.
yep,
He does. He
He
does.
does it in this
definitely,
song.
definitely.
Song "Gone."
Yes. Okay. I was gonna bring that up. Okay. Yeah. Please,
Oh
please, please go
man,
for it.
I love that song. And that, you know, of many songs on this album, I'm nodding my head to it. I'm in a trance, and it puts me into flow, but they don't move me. This song moved me, right? The
Yeah.
lyrics move me, and part of it is what he's doing at the end of this song. So he switches up. It's almost because he's a producer and he's thinking about the impact on the end user, so to speak, right, on the listener,
Totally.
that he almost stops you from that feeling of flow in that last verse where he says, "What's the summer of the shy? Got to offer an 18-year-old, sell drugs on the job, got to play your role." But then he, you know, at the end, he makes a point that's actually a beautiful point. That's, you know, still a self-aggrandizing and all the rest, but it's very beautifully said, right? Says, "Hold on, I'll handle it. Don't start panicking, stay calm. Shorty's at the door because they need more." Right? Inspiration for their life, their souls, and their songs. They say, "Sorry, Mr. West is gone."
Yeah. And that's how the song ends.
Yeah, that's it, right? Cold ending, or whatever you would call it, right?
Yeah.
I to go off onto that, we're hearing Gone right now, but Gone is probably one of my favorite complete tracks on this album. Piggybacking on what Gary's saying, the lyrics are for one are great. I mean, they're sort of stand out from the album. There's some other songs where Ye and his collaborators just like spitfire. Not all of them, obviously. This, I think, is one of them. And constant to the Quince. Cons to the Quince, bringing the heat. That fucking verse was dope. That was really good. It was what's up?
Consequence. Oh, that's right, dude. That's right.
Yeah.
On this track. I'm looking at Genius now. Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the moments. I know that you, Dion, you told me that Cons has a whole career now, and again, I am admittedly, right, I'm a fan of what I'm a fan of. I don't listen to
I don't either. I just know that because of he's on this track. But
yeah, no, and he's been on. I heard him like on Hot 97 one time in the car with you, and I just know he's moved on from the shadow of a Tribe Called Quest a long time ago, you know, but he's improved as an MC tremendously since I always found that inclusion of Consequence on Beats, Rhymes, and Life as one of the weirder choices, but probably because Fife was less involved at the time. I don't know, you know, they needed another voice, but yeah. Anyway, at any rate, it was interesting to see Consequence on there. Cause I don't know much of his output these days.
And like I said, I don't either. So he could be a fire artist that just had a couple bad verses that we heard 20 years ago, and we're like, oh, making fun of this.
Young
it
at the time.
Anyway, the harbinger of doom.
Hey, you know what? Anything's possible.
I don't mean that. Listen, and again, I don't mean that as an insult. Like, he's a talented rapper, you know, but it just the only impression I had of him was his appearances on that Tribe album and that one Tribe freestyle where he said "cons to the Quince" 8 million times. but the one thing about that we should admit about that was when people actually freestyled when they freestyled. So that was all off the top. So.
Exactly. So
he gets the
also,
pass.
you remember the name "Cons to the Quince"?
Yeah,
forever.
It's true. It's like Mike Jones.
Forever.
Exactly. It's deliberate.
And funny also in Gone, just a little sidebar. Kanye has a line where he goes, "And moved to Oklahoma just to live in my aunt's house. Yeah, romance the thought of leaving it all behind." Whatever, it rhymes with the previous and the next lines, whatever. But he did move to Wyoming for a little bit, a couple years ago, to sort of get away. So I just thought that was a little bit foreshadowing. Actually, there's another song that has some foreshadowing too, but I'll get to that later on. But to piggyback on what Gary was saying, I think it's after Consequences verse, the beat sort of takes a sort of dark turn, like a movie score. And then I went back, and if you listen to the song, like just listen to the instrumentals. The instrumentals tell a story in its own, like on its own.
It's like movements in a composition. Yeah, totally.
And it flows with the lyrics, but also flows independent from the lyrics. And like it does, like this, that's why it's one of my favorite songs on the album, because.
I know what I know what you mean, and it's the strings, right? So I think,
Yeah.
like, getting back to that, I think that was such a awesome idea to like welcome in a composer and a, you know, he's also a, you know, he's a producer, this guy, another producer's mind, and another like
Mm-hmm.
session musician to like, here's the samples, make them bombastic, you know, like make them dynamic. That's the other word I could
Yeah.
use to describe the music part of the album, right? Not the lyrics, but the music is
Mm-hmm.
very dynamic. It from
Absolutely.
lows to highs, emotional shifts, and that, I mean, again, this is a master class in like how to make an enter. What impresses me is like I find I love producers that are wild. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we did an episode about a Cool Keith album that had Dan the Automator, and he is another magnificent producer who switches up the sounds just like this. But he never made no pop music.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? To make music that's so readily accessible for the masses to gobble up and digest and love, that is also highly detailed and highly polished and highly structured, that's impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Because the simple minds of the masses, and I don't mean to be insulting, but most people who,
I'm one of them.
no, you're not, Gary, but you know, most people who just, you know, hits become hits because you know, they get played enough, and they, you know, people get hypnotized by you know, simplicity. You know what I mean? Simplicity is inherent in pop music. So to make complex pop music successfully is very impressive. And that, you know, yeah, keep going. Sorry about that.
No. This is
Well, to me, what that means, Benny, is like, and I'm going to speak from the perspective of, and like I like to say, like, I'm a basic bitch, right? When it comes to some of this music, I speak from a lay person's perspective because I don't record music, and I haven't gotten into a lot of the history. Like, you know, I was looking, you know, I was looking at Genius for the first time, listening to this album this week and learning a lot about Kanye West. I didn't know about a lot of these things, but this album, I could listen to, and once I've listened to it several times, I could really start appreciating the production of the album the same way that I would some other albums that are my favorites of all times, like Sublime albums that are recorded in the studio. After listening to a track 100 times over many years, I started listening and thinking, wow, somebody really cared about like little details that I never noticed before. To me, it just sounded great right before, but then now I know why it sounded great, because there are all these little details in it that are not simple at all, and somebody had to be deliberate in putting in there, right? I guess that's what good production. That's part of what good production is.
And I think he was kind of the precursor to artists like Tyler the Creator. Honestly, who came around, you know, several years after Kanye, but similar to Kanye, Tyler is also, first of all, Tyler produces his own stuff and is a rapper. I mean, I think Tyler's a better rapper than Kanye. But both produce their own, rap themselves. They kind of have, you know, sort of different styles than like quote unquote traditional hip hop. Both of them, you know, Ben, you've called this album Late Registration a pop album. I would tend to disagree. Called a hip hop album with pop undertones. I think Tyler does sort of the same thing, and both of them, like, you know, they're sort of like, you know, I guess Kanye is kind of like the Pied Piper of backpack rappers, right? Like that sort of era of rappers. You got, you know, like
what do you mean?
So like, you know, the sort of nerdy, like, you know, like Tyler and Oddface. Yeah, exactly. Well, you mentioned in the beginning of this. Ben, what's up?
Yeah. So my take on that is he did advertise himself at first. He would wear. There's the Dave Chappelle episode, the Chappelle Show, an episode with him and Common. I believe it's Common, or maybe Tyler.
The performance, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In a kitchen.
Yeah. I remember that.
You know, he had the backpack on, and he flexed. He flexed and advertised in that realm, but I think it was brief. And you know, backpack rap as I see it is like attention to lyricism and attention to, like, again, as I said in the last episode, I think Doom was the, you know, poster child and Pied Piper.
What's in the backpack?
So it means, like, you know, I'm always writing. I'm more about, you know, I'm more about the lyrics. I'm more about substance than I am about flesh.
So you
You
got
know
you
what
got
I
a
mean?
notebook in
And
there. You got some pens, maybe some markers, maybe some graffiti markers, maybe, right? If you're if
maybe
you're
a sandwich, man. You
Maybe a
know, it
sandwich.
could be a
maybe a
sandwich,
Arizona iced tea
maybe
would
a
be
juice box.
What's funny? I didn't look at maybe I'm mistaken. I always just, like, looked at backpack rappers, not like that. I looked at it as sort of like that culture rapper that's like the sort of young, or not young, they're all young, but like the sort of nerdy, like non-traditional background kind of rap. Like, you know, like this kid may be like, and this has nothing to do with race or anything like that, but this kid could be black, white, Asian, whatever, but this kid comes from like more of like a privileged background, but he you know, he wears his glasses and his backpack, but yo, dude could rhyme, you know, like and again, I always bring in like for example, artists like Earl and Tyler from Odd Future. I mean, J. Cole to a certain degree later on, like just these sort of Schoolboy Q, people like
Yeah.
this, like these like sort of newer artists. But I could be wrong. That's what I was viewing as backpack rap. But if I'm wrong, then my theory about this is kind of out the window, because that's not what I was trying to.
We'll have to revisit the definition of backpack rap in the
Sure.
next episode. Let's not.
Either way, whether backpack rap or not, I still think that his style is still was a precursor to Tyler. And then the other thing I was gonna say is like they both the point I was starting to make with Ben was saying about this being sort of a popish album. Part of that is because like there's some songs in this album that straight up have no rapping on them, and Tyler does the same thing. I still think they're good. I really like it. Obviously, it's not for pure hip hop, but it's not, it's going to change sort of the vibe of the album. Yeah, I think yeah. No, what's up?
This album, Diamonds Are Forever, is actually one of my favorites on the album.
Which version?
This song.
Which version? The remix earlier?
The first one.
The one with Jay-Z?
Yeah. I think Jay's verse is really, really good.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very topical. Kanye's. I was most impressed with this verse by Kanye because it's like, the whole thing. He's going back and forth between the diamond of the Rockefeller logo and kind of the not the shame, but the the drama and the bad. What, I don't even know what the word I'm looking for. The bad press that blood diamonds get. Conflict diamonds.
I think the word is horror.
Horror and the stigma, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But, and going back and forth between what he is and isn't rapping about with diamonds metaphorically and not. But my only thought was, if he's still rocking diamonds after this, I don't know how much of these arguments he's making are too too credible. But at any rate,
I mean, you know what it is? It's the way I look at that. You obviously have a good point that he doesn't have a leg to stand on if he is wearing diamonds still after having.
And I don't know. He very well may have stopped wearing diamonds for all I know. I don't
think that's the case at all, because again, like, whatever. I'll get into that in a bit, but I think that's kind of the same way as like, expecting a rapper who raps about shooting people and selling drugs to expect them to still rap and shooting drugs, rap and shooting drugs, to sell crack and kill people. You don't expect them to actually still do that. And the same with Kanye. Like, to me, it's like it's subject matter in a song. Totally. I don't expect him to actually follow through with that. If he does,
right,
whatever, more power to him. But
I was impressed with this one, and this was one of the least poppy. So this is what I mean by pop music. Okay, he respectably, right? A lot of his songs have chord progressions, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of our favorite beats of all time, we discussed already, is a Busta Rhymes beat, Blad That's not a chord progression. That is literally a loop, like I don't know, a 15-second loop or something, like just over and over and over throughout.
Like true boom bap.
His songs go through chord changes, but those chord changes are chord changes you would find in a song that would be on pop radio most of the time.
Sure.
On that song "Gone," on the song the song about his mother.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? These are that's why I call it pop music, because the musical landscape is like pop chord progressions and very accessible and very I consider the opposite of pop. Like it's obviously hip hop, right? But you listen to a Wu-Tang on the first, let's say 2 Wu-Tang albums or any of the solo projects, and those songs you can't play those in a dance hall. You know what I mean? You can't expect someone to like groove and boogie to those.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
good music to beat people up to.
Yes.
Yeah, bust your gun.
Or to think about beating people up. I've done a lot of that. But yeah, that's all. And it's not an insult. Pop, to me, pop
yeah.
is not an insult. You know, some of my favorite albums are, I would consider, like certain Beatles albums, pop music. You know what I mean? So whatever.
It's funny that that you think that this is one of the least popular songs of the album, because this, or actually the later one, the non-remix, was actually the lead single for this album. So it's really funny that you think it's not the most popular one.
But you get where I'm coming from.
Oh yeah,
right?
no,
You
totally.
Okay. I'm not saying this is like, I'm not saying this is something you're going to hear on Z100 or I don't even know if that exists anymore, but like whatever the pop radio is.
Yeah.
But the sonic qualities of it are they're pop songs.
Yo, Z100 does exist, by the way.
It does.
Somehow it stayed exactly the same as when it was.
Wait, are you saying they still play that song that goes, another night, another dream, but always you, it's like a vision. That's the song I think of when I think of Z100.
The entire world has changed, and Z100 has stayed exactly the same, which leads me to understand
which means
now
they have the cure to corona.
There is no and. That's it. Yeah, or they're a money laundering scheme or something. Like, there's no reason for them to stay exactly the same.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how it's
Dion, I know that you always held this album in high regard. You always wanted me to listen to it. I appreciate it now. Like, I listened to it. I know, I'm not saying I wouldn't listen to it again. It was more enjoyable than I thought it would be from my own prejudices. So I'm glad you did that. But being that you were the this was your pick, I would love to hear how it impacted you, what moved you the most, what you're most impressed with, your favorite parts.
Sure. So that was a good transition, because I wanted to sort of get into this. It's something I didn't really notice the first several years I listened to this album, that I was talking to Gary about on the side a little bit. But this album has a theme throughout the entire album, from the first track down to the last. I didn't realize what the theme was until I gave it this listen. And the theme is basically the sort of essentially the life of a young Black entertainer in this country from the beginning. So like the first song, Heard Him Say, it's got like a sort of poppy sound, like uplifting sound. But if you listen to what he's talking about some real shit about, like, just living in poverty in Chicago, which again, he didn't necessarily live in poverty. He grew up in basically a middle-class household. But he's just talking about like what it's like for, just because you grow up in that, in not that environment doesn't mean you can't speak on it, right? And he even starts like the very first, like one of the first lines, he talks about a conspiracy theory about the government administering AIDS. And it's just like, it sounds ridiculous at first, but that conspiracy theory holds a lot of weight in the Black community, man. Along with the CIA inventing crack, which he also alludes to later on. Again, these sound ridiculous, but it's like, do a little bit of math. It's like it's not that crazy to us.
Well, it's like on the level of the Chinese government sprung coronavirus on the world, right? It's on that level. When I hear that, it's like, that's plausible, right?
It's plausible,
blah blah blah, right? But it's like, that's highly unlikely. That's not the Occam's razor. Fucking,
you know what it is?
We're getting a little non-musical here, but here's my sorry to cut you off, Dion. Here's my take on all of those. Whether and I don't judge anyone who believes it, because who knows what's true and what isn't. I'm honestly of the belief that we don't have a clue on what is true and what isn't, what actually went down and what hasn't. And like, I think like we're all blind to like the evils that big corporations that pay off governments, like actually, what motivates it and what actually is happening. I think that there's so much that goes into keeping us distracted with our iPhones and our social media to just blind us from atrocities that major governments, I'll go as far as probably some shadow organization running the world. I honestly believe that, but so like I wouldn't, like, if it somehow was proven that the government created crack, or that that the American government put AIDS into the world, like to as an oppression to to the black community, I wouldn't be surprised personally. But I also don't think there's any evidence that,
Of course
you know
not.
what I mean? Like, so like I would believe it. Like, fuck it. Like, we live in one of the most, like, we have a horrible history. Let's be
And
pretty
that's
honest.
exactly
You
what
know
I was.
what I mean? Like,
That's exactly what I was going to allude to. The reason why it's like, again, I'm not saying that these are believable, and I know we're sort of getting off track, but not really, because it's exactly what he's talking
yeah,
about.
no, he's rapping about it.
It's the part of the reason why it's not as far-fetched, especially to black people, is because not even 200 years ago, people thought of black people as 3/5 of a human and had them as slaves. That wasn't 200 years ago. So people are capable of doing that. You think they're not capable of administering a bio disease to wipe out? Like, when you start to realize that, it's like, oh wait, yeah, right.
Dude,
You know what I mean? Like, that's why it's like not so, and that's why you always hear a lot of conspiracy theories in like the black and brown community, because there's some crazier shit than the things that are conspiracy theories. Crazier shit than that has happened to us and to Jews and to like any marginalized group of people in this country and in this world. It's just it's bigger than. I don't know. I know.
This is we should start a conspiracy theory podcast.
Another one.
But
let me tell you about 5G. Let me tell you about 5G death towers, bro.
Yeah. Let me tell you about consequence.
But go back to the song. It's interesting how he sort of breaks you into the album with that, with like, talking about some real shit, but then the musically it's like pleasant, right? You hear Adam Levine from he's from Maroon 5, right? And right, he's the one that does the chorus, like you hear that, like it's a nice chorus, it's a nice hook, it's poppy. That I bet this is definitely poppy. This is definitely one of your poppy, like, yes, of course, this is 100% pop, at least as far as the chorus goes. But what he's doing is he's sort of like introducing a mainstream audience into this sort of world, and it's like, all right, here's the life of black entertainer. Here's how a lot of it starts in the hood, where like shit is just fucking terrible. The next song is "Touch the Sky," where it's like, all right, now I'm finally getting like, sort of, reaching pinnacles or whatever. It samples a Curtis Mayfield song, "Move On Up," which is very, very uplifting.
Yep. That's Curtis Mayfield and the Impressions. Not the Impressions. Was that the band's name?
Yeah, I think so. The Impressions. Maybe.
Hold on, I'm Googling it.
Yeah. And yeah, so it goes into that, and then of course the following. I'm not gonna go track by track, but I'm just for example, like the next song's "Gold Digger," where okay, now I'm here, and like so now I got a little bit of success, and now it's where all the women come in. They want like their piece of me and everything. So it goes through that. The next track is a skit. The skits are fucking great.
I have one thing to ask about the skits. I want to get into that. So I wanted to know your guys' opinion and interpretation of the skits, because to me, I don't know if the skits act as satire, because at the end, right? Yeah. So like, let's talk about it. So the skits are like a troupe and a crew of broke people who celebrate and march to the, almost like a pride in that they are broke, that they live broke, that they don't eat, that they don't have nice things. And it's like almost like a source of like, we stay broke, we are broke people. It's like almost like an army troop, like it's motivating to stay broke.
It's not even an army troop. It's exactly what it is. It's a fraternity. It's a black
pledge
fraternity.
Class.
Okay. It's a pledge class. That's a pledge. Right. Yeah, that's a pledge class doing what's called are like they like in skit 2, I think, where they're doing like the lockstep kind of stepping. Right. That's probably part of what's called a probate, which is like the sort of the initiation for.
I'm the only non-Greek person here.
Honestly, so neither of us. But these are things that even me and Gary don't know about, because neither me and Gary were in traditional black fraternities. These are specific things to black fraternities and sororities that do
like the Kappas on the
Kappa Alpha Psi.
Okay,
so Q Dogs. Yep.
Sure.
So running with that, I wanted to know your guys' opinion, because I know at the end he like kind of flips it, like they're like almost like shaming Kanye for flossing. You know what I mean? For like not being. Are these skits of bad taste? And are they like insulting broke people? Are they saying like, yo, you have a choice you can make something better of yourself? Or are they saying like, I feel like they're making fun of broke people?
I don't look. Gary, what do you think?
And like that was my first thought. I was like, man, like this isn't bad taste. Like some people don't have the option, and some people are just broke.
I have thoughts, but Gary,
sure.
go ahead.
I got a couple thoughts about this, and the thing that struck me about these skits is not so much the theme of brokenness it's more the theme of conformity, right? Like whatever ridiculous thing that a fraternity or some sort of like a Greek organization will have a pledge class of people conform to, and it's always ridiculous. I
Yeah,
speak
no
from
matter what. Yeah.
Yeah, on my second listen, I noticed that was like the theme of that in that conformity that you just mentioned, like almost like that he's kind of saying that the image of the up and coming rap artist needs to be that you were hungry and you suffered,
Mm,
and like just because I wasn't hungry and I didn't suffer financially, you're saying I don't belong.
right,
Yes.
right. It's almost as if
Okay.
the theme is that if you don't go through this exact experience, you don't have a right to be
Hmm.
successful,
Hmm.
right?
Okay. Yeah. Then it's
That's
funny.
kind of the way I read that.
Yeah. No. No. I think you're absolutely right.
I mean, I'm sure that's only part of the picture, but that's my takeaway, and that was the piece of it that was relatable to me.
And it's funny because the end of the last skit is the resolution to that, where you are kind of welcomed into like what he's talking about here. But at first, right, the first few skits, if you don't get to that last skit, it's kind of like if that skit at the end where he introduces it, like the narrative that they're saying, we found out Kanye isn't broke, so he's
Yeah.
not one of us.
Yeah.
If that did, if you didn't get to that part,
Yeah.
like I again on my first listen, I was like, whoa, like he's really going at like
But you know what?
poverty.
You know what it is too. Honestly, I feel like it's like a thing in Black culture to almost like make fun of each other for poverty because they're so like it's like especially let's say you're in the hood and Gary, look, you lived in Canarsie. You probably seen this. You probably had friends where it's just like, look, we're all in this together. So we're gonna make fun of the fact that yeah, haha, yeah, I didn't we used to eat cereal with the fork. Yo, that shit was funny, right? Back in the day, it's like almost like a bonding thing. And that's how I sort of looked at least the first two, where it's not making fun. It's like you're in on the joke. You know what I mean? Like as like the
Okay.
you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
It's a complicated conversation.
Of course it
It's like
is.
everybody's going through some level of I guess from my experience at least, everybody's going through some level of brokenness, right? And
Mm-hmm.
if you do have something that's special and that is like flashy or that other people want, it's like, oh cool, like yeah, that's badass, right? Like you could floss that, and also it will elicit some jealousy, etc. But you're in the end, it's not like you made it out of the hood, right? You're still hanging out with the same crew of people who
Mm-hmm.
are in the same economic situation. You're probably not in a very different economic situation. You're just spending your money irresponsibly, right? It's a complicated thing.
And it is, and I don't have the right or the enough of my own identification with it to you know to have too much of an opinion. It was just my initial take was like, man, he's going at broke people. But then I came to understand that it was almost like he's going at people who are going at him for not being broke enough.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Exactly. Exactly.
I don't know if that was a narrative that was taking place at the time, because again, I didn't know who Kanye West was,
No, it
admittedly,
was.
until Jesus Walks from the first. When that dropped, I
Yeah.
was like, that was when the impact was felt for
Yeah.
me. And I know he was producing way before that.
Same here. I
I just
didn't know.
didn't
I didn't
know.
know him as a producer
Yeah.
when I was like in the '90s or whatever. I think I
Yeah.
got introduced with Jesus. Well, actually, no, it was really Through the Wire. Was the first song, which
Mm.
I'll touch on that in 1 second. But um, yeah, check oh the skits. Um, yeah, I remember when I first saw it when we first started talking about Kanye today, we did say remember again he because he didn't grow up in that environment. I feel like that was always kind of like a chip on his shoulder, and it's a reason again why he didn't hear about him as a rapper, is because these labels that he had relationships with as a producer, like they all knew him, but none of them really wanted to take a chance on him as a rapper because he didn't come from that background. He
Because
didn't
he
have
wasn't
that.
street hardened.
Wasn't street hard, and I think
So to
that's
speak.
exactly why these skits are there. I think you're right. I think so again, it's not making fun of. It's more like this is like it's metaphorically like this is where like where I'm coming from and where like
Yeah.
what people think of me.
And I guess you could say that was an impact, in his, that was almost like a, he went to bat for all the talented people out there who weren't necessarily, didn't have a backstory worth, rapping about,
Mm-hmm.
for lack of a better way to put it. And,
Mm-hmm.
I think that changed a lot in the 2000s, where now where you come from matters Very little,
Yeah,
unless
SoundCloud rappers,
you're
yeah.
like rapping about how much drugs you sell.
Yeah.
You know, then people will probably go at you if you never sold drugs. But
Look at Tekashi. That's exactly what happened to Tekashi.
right,
You know, he
right.
had to fake the funk.
But I think a
Um,
lot of people are finding success in, you know, since this album in, you know, the 2000s and on,
mhm.
that weren't, you know, from a struggle.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
so yeah.
And then just finish up with the skits. The third one was probably my favorite one because it's the first one. Like the first two are like, you know, again, now that we've talked about it and you can listen to them again, you could look at it. They're humorous. They're funny. It's like, you know, it's the broke, broke, you know, whatever. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
The third one is the first one where it's like it's still sort of humorous, but it's now has some jabbing lines. It's like, again, like, yeah, remember we used to eat cereal with the fork. Remember when mom used to be the Christmas tree? It's like, again, like at first you think about these images, like, yeah, that's funny, but then you think about it, it's like, you know, that's really fucking sad. That like, you know, these people come from this environment where like they're not eating cereal from a fork because it's fun. It's because they're trying to save fucking milk. Like that's a real thing. That's really sad. And it's like it started getting to. It's like, oh, okay, that's where these guys are coming from. But then the fourth skit is like, all right, yeah, I'm in it. I get you, but yeah, I got these new shoes. I ain't with you guys, man. Like I ain't with this. Like you guys are broke. I'm gonna sell out and I'm gonna get this money. You know what I mean? And he's very honest about it. I think that was just Kanye being honest about where he's coming from. He's not trying to be, you know, a fake, you know, whatever. He's like, oh, this is me. This is my environment. This is who I am, and this is what I'm gonna rap about.
Dion, you it's funny. You're one of the only people I know, you know, that uses the term sellout in a way that isn't inherently negative. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think selling out is a negative thing in general because I mean, it depends on what your background is. Not background. That's the wrong thing to say. It depends on what your situation is and how and why you sold out and how you sold out, quote unquote. For example, like the Roots, for example, pretty obvious. I mean, if you look at where they are right now, they're a house band for the fucking Tonight Show. One could say, sure, they sold out. I look at it as, okay, yeah, maybe they sold out, but you know what they also did? They secured a bag for like 5 years. You know, and
more than 5 years.
Yeah, but yeah, exactly 10 years. Yeah, exactly. Like they're like, and they're still able to perform. Like they're not able to tour as much as they were, so they had to sacrifice that. But they're the house band on the Tonight Show. So yeah, I look at them as they sold out a little bit, but do you, bro? Like whatever, you know.
Like and right, it's not like they're gone and they're making a totally different kind of music, or they're not contributing, right? It's like the other night I was listening to, you know, over Zoom watching Questlove do a set because we're all home with coronavirus. You know what I'm saying? And here he is. This is somebody who we've gone to concerts before, and it was a very different environment from the one that he's working in day to day now, but he's still very much a part of my musical life. And producing things that I love.
And not to get in too much of a debate, but on that note, Gary, like you watched Questlove, you watched him, you know, flex on the wheels of steel, which is awesome. I've seen him do it at Brooklyn Bowl before, which is incredible.
I never got a chance to go.
You know, I wouldn't even call what the Roots did selling out because they never sacrificed the hip hop. They're still putting out incredible, ambitious albums, and
they're not really putting out albums anymore though.
Well, they mean since they signed with Fallon, they put out 3 albums.
I guess
and Black Thought has released 2 incredible underground.
Yes,
that's what I mean. So, you know, if you want to, you know, I don't consider them sellouts because they just enhanced their financial situation and continued to put out hip hop.
You're right,
in a very raw hip hop form, even though you know, some of their newer albums were all over the place. They're not pop music. They're not.
No, actually, I put one of theirs. This we could talk about as weeks down, but one of their albums, Undone, and another one, and it's called And Shoot Your Cousin. Are both concept albums that are fucking great.
Yeah, they're incredible. But, incredible albums.
I see what you mean. Yeah, go on, Gary. What's up?
Something else about the skits. It just occurred to me as we continue to talk.
Went off into Roots land.
Yeah.
Right off into Roots. Fine. You know,
all good.
This specifically felt like, you know, the insulting nature of what he was talking about and the fact that it's like actually horrifically offensive in some ways. It reminds me of Dozens, right? Dozens, like
playing the Dozens,
and aunts and each other's poverty and how ugly, you know, your face is or how ugly your mother is, like incredibly just like offensive, right? If taken at face value. but it's a kind of endearing way that
Exactly.
you interact, especially like as a juvenile, right? Especially as a kid, right? You talk about your mother's so cheap, she squeezed a penny hard enough to give Lincoln a black eye, or your mother's so fat she jumped up and never came down. And, it's like
Farside had a whole song about this.
One of the best.
Word. That's your mama,
Yeah,
right?
the
Yeah,
best
your
hip-hop
mama.
Anyway,
No, Gary, that's a really good point. I didn't really think about that, but that's exactly that. What you kind of did is you kind of sort of added to exactly the point that I was trying to make before, where it's like where Ben was looking at it sort of like insulting. It's like it's not insulting. It's more. It is more endearing. And I mean,
dude, some of my favorite hip hop's in the lyrics in the world are incredibly insulting. Like I recognize that it's part of the hip hop, vocabulary is to diss.
Yeah. Let's just put it this way. No one listening, no poor person listening to this album is getting offended by those skits. I guarantee it. They're all
okay.
Well, I mean, who knows? Maybe, I mean, look,
This day and age,
this day and age, there's a lot of people that get offended about everything. Sure. But you know what I mean? Like in general, like people, they get it. They get it. They should get it.
Yeah.
So just it weaves in and out. It's let's see, like what was the next one? Yeah, Drive Slow, My Way Home, like all these like crack music is actually a great album that a great song.
I have a note on the two songs you just mentioned.
Let's start with the first one. Yeah.
So Drive Slow,
mm-hmm.
which is what's playing in the background, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So Drive Slow is interesting. I heard the sample and I'm like, wow, clearly like the only song I immediately recognized was an Eminem song from the Slim Shady EP before he blew up. He released an EP in Detroit, and it's a song called No One's Iller, which is a great underground song, and it's pretty crazy to think about because it's basically the same sample but flipped a little differently, and the difference in like this sounds like such a clean and slickly produced major label commercial hip hop song, whereas the same sample flipped in a similar manner with different lyrics and different subject matters and different styles of rapping. It's like Eminem and Bizarre and like other members from D12, and it's like very hardcore underground, well before Eminem became a pop star. Really, it's interesting how the same sample can be used in completely different contexts. And then I went deeper and I realized this song was sampled on 33 different songs. So clearly it's a great, starting point to build a beat.
What was your favorite of that 33?
Honestly, No One's Iller. I love the first few years of Eminem's career. His stuff back then was really incredible.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that was my note on Drive Slow.
And then
Dion, what was your favorite of use of that same beat?
I didn't. I actually didn't see the list yet. I saw that there was a list on the.
There's a Tupac one.
There's a J. Cole song too, I think.
The Tupac "Shorty Wanna Be a Thug" is a great song.
Oh right, yeah. That is a great one.
Was a young middle class. Oh my God! I mean, just amazing. It was that song really. That was a touching song.
But with Drive Slow, I did like a couple things that sort of surprised. The one thing that surprised me was Paul Wall. I don't know much about him. I know he's like dirty South rapper, Houston, whatever, he known for his girls and everything like that. But his verse wasn't that bad actually in this.
Wasn't as bad as like what the stigma his name carried.
No, not at all.
Me too.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
The line, he goes, "A young Houston hard hitter, all about the skrilla, riding something candy coated, crawling like a caterpillar." That's a dope fucking line, yo. Yeah, that's sick. Really like he's actually like he surprised me in that. Like, bravo, Paul Wall. But they also it was interesting on this track because if you guys remember the Chopped and Screwed era, you remember that shit? It was around this time where it's about like I want to say like from like 03 to 06. It was like a Dirty South thing where all they would do was just take songs and slow the fuck out of them, including like the beat and the vocals. And this song ends with it being chopped and screwed, and I think that was kind of an homage. So he brought Paul. I think this song is basically like his homage to the South. It's like, yo, I got Paul Wall here. I got like OG Paul Wall's on the track. I'm gonna chop and screw it at the end. I'm gonna do like, it was kind of dope. It's not it's not like exactly the rap for me, chopped and screwed, because it's like but the purpose of it isn't to to show lyrics or anything like that. It's just like, yo, let's slow the shit up. Let's go like deep south style, like we're slow like molasses. Like that's like
Mm.
that's like the style. So I did kind of think that it was kind of cool to be
It's
paid
nice.
homage to that. And also one more thing about Drive Slow. In it continuing the theme that I was talking about, the previous track was what was a skit, but then before that was Gold Digger. And I think maybe the song is kind of like saying, it's like, all right, maybe you're going a little bit fast. You got Gold Diggers that going after you. Maybe it's trying to say, just slow down in life, enjoy the ride a little bit. Like you get a little, and because then the next track is My Way Home, where it's a very like woke kind of like.
It's funny that he made the song and then he went on to be Kanye West.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Admittedly, also, and I'll let you keep going, dude. I just want to a quick note on that is that this is my favorite of his output that I've heard. Again, I haven't sat down and really listened because I don't choose to.
Sure.
He just never moved me in that way. But this is like rooted in samples and in a style of hip hop that I could at least I could groove to.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like there's choices he made or pieces of music that he put out in recent years that I'm like, well, I'm never gonna listen to that album. You know what I mean? Like
you should give College Dropout a listen if you like this.
College
Dropout is even more.
I've heard that one.
It's great. It's just his debut. It's great.
A friend of mine from camp there was one summer where he played it nonstop. So I'm more familiar with that one than I was this one.
Actually, real quick, and I know you haven't know about crack music, Ben. I'll get to that in a second. I'll bridge with My Way Home for real quick. But before even that, interesting note about Kanye. Remember, like I think it was either last week or the week before we started talking about 50 Cent and how he got shot 9 times, and that kind of like jump started his career. And then there's like the rumors that like he did it himself, whatever. But that's actually irrelevant for the point I'm about to make. Kanye kind of had a similar thing that sort of jumped out his career. Was the crash, exactly. And then this, Gary, you know about this, right?
Yeah, Through the Wire.
Through the Wire, exactly. And then so that was kind of his thing, and that was on College Dropout. So I find it funny, not funny, but it's interesting that he couldn't break into the rap scene. It took him getting into a car crash and have his jaw wired shut, ironically, to jumpstart the rap portion of his career. I thought that was incredible.
And also that album, College Dropout with Through the Wire, another thing I'm very impressed about is he took an album. That album sounds nothing like this album.
No, not
at
all.
I'll always give credit and be impressed by an artist who can literally create individual pieces of music that don't share a common thread, and he does that. He reinvents himself a lot, and this was a reinvention from first album to sophomore album was a completely different. Very successfully,
and the next one too. Graduation also is very different. It's a little bit more similar to this than this is to College Dropout, but it also is still its own thing. Because then he starts getting into like electronic shit in Graduation. A little bit, it works. But then the following album, it's like all electronic, and that shit I'm not the 808s and
that one's rough. Anything I've heard off that one is pretty rough.
I'm not. It's the only Kanye album that, admittedly, I've never listened to start to finish because I just can't get through it. Yeah. But anyway, so My Way Home. There's actually no Kanye vocals on this. It's all Common.
Yeah, and I love it. I'm sorry. That was bad.
Well,
I'm sorry.
The reason
Common's verse is awesome, and that's another thing, dude. Again, his features kind of outshine him on this, in my opinion. Like Nas, Jay-Z, Common, they're gonna rap better than him, and that's what I mean. Like I just never got into him because I don't know, his raps never did it for me for whatever reason,
This song was actually supposed to be a Common song produced by Kanye, but what was the reason? I forget what the reason was why they included it here. I think it's because it just didn't fit in Common's album, and then they had John, the producer, Brian, do a little bit to this and include it here. But I think it's I don't know. It's like Kanye is. He's obviously not the first woke artist, but he introduced wokeness, I think, to a wider audience, and
totally.
And
first
he has
pop. Yeah. So like the last time that a popular, by popular I mean spun on the radio regularly, rapper was going that route was Public Enemy. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right.
Like Public Enemy, you never heard a Public Enemy song that didn't actively promote black empowerment and point out the racism and the horrible nature. It was very political.
Yeah.
Where I wouldn't call Kanye a political rapper,
No.
but he welcomes a lot of political and woke-ish
Messages
themes into his songs, and he's not
Mhm.
afraid. He definitely never had fear. That's one thing.
No.
Yeah,
He's a
he's a
fearless
kook
individual.
with open arms.
Yeah.
And in this track especially, I mean, who better to have? I mean, technically, he had two features on this. He had Common, who was his Chicago predecessor of woke rapping, and then he uses a sample from Gil Scott-Heron, who was like the godfather of wokeness in America. He's famous for his songs in the '60s, or the Revolution Will Not Be Televised.
Yep.
So yes, I love this track because of that. It was like a poem interlude, basically.
Can we talk in part to inform me about the difference between what Public Enemy would produce and create and we'd hear on the radio and some of the some of the ideas here. I think that Kanye takes it to a place where he's talking about these things and he puts it back into the public consciousness, which is important because we should think about all of these issues. But like the opinion that he seems to hold is the kind of extreme, hard to believe opinion, right? And like I think Dion, I'm not disagreeing with the point that you were making earlier that this is something to be thinking about, and even something that's smart, to be paranoid about, that maybe the government is so organized in its putting down of minorities that they would introduce crack as a pandemic into the country itself. That might have happened, but like that seems like an extreme point of view. Whereas, Fight the Power and like songs by Public Enemy that were just making a very straightforward, reasonable point that everybody should and could get behind. That's a different, I don't know. It's a different approach. And
but
I
also
like that
15 years prior. And like, maybe you look at that as like the sort of like, this is how like we're going to get in, like, start introducing little ideas. And then 15 years later, by the time you get to Kanye, it's like, all right, well, the flood doors are a little bit more open, so I can sort of get a little bit further and
Well, I think the main difference between the two, and they're very, like, besides the fact that they mention political subject matter in their raps, they're completely different artists.
Oh, yeah.
Public Enemy, it's almost like they were not a call to arms, but a call to action. This music is intended to motivate you to make a change. Where I don't see that in any of.
It's like Rage, actually.
Well, what are you going to do about the fact that, like, maybe space aliens did this, or maybe some insane thing happened that's like maybe the government is like super organized with the primary goal of putting down minority populations. Like there's nothing you could really do about that. You're helpless in that reality. Whereas the other message is much more. I don't know. It's much more powerful.
Easy to swallow.
Yeah, no,
it's much more action oriented, man. It's like that's the shit. That's the kind of thing that during a political march, people can talk about in a way that is actionable, right? That could lead to real change. Whereas the points
there will never be evidence, right? Even if it happened.
Yeah, that's the problem.
And I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm saying it's very possible. But even if any of these things happened, there will never, ever be evidence of it. Ever.
What can you do even as a person, right? Like, what can you do politically? What can you do with your vote? What can you do with organizing and making real change in the world in an actual practical way that can stop some crazy conspiracy theory like that from happening? You really can't, right? It's like
people go insane doing it.
It leaves
people
you
go insane and get arrested and like ruin their lives and their families' lives going after those unattainable.
Basically, Gary, what you're saying is that it just makes more sense to, like, it's not necessarily that it's as ridiculous as it seems, but it's just like sort of focus your attention on things that are more realistic to change. For example, like up until 10 years ago, I mean, look, we're from New York, so I would assume that you guys have been aware of this, but the rest of the country have only recently been aware that police have been killing and beating up black people for decades. You guys from New York, so you guys already knew this shit, but like that's one of those things.
Smartphones were never invented, the Black Lives Matter movement
would never exist.
Would never have existed.
Exactly. And one could say that was a conspiracy theory like 15 years ago and people weren't believing, but it's like, no, guys, this shit happens.
Yeah.
But But no, that's a good point, Gary. I see what you mean, but I think to counter that, like he doesn't really dwell on any of these things in the album. He like mentions
Right,
it in
right.
passing. And I think that's
That's
part of the
right.
point.
But
It's
it's
like,
part
oh,
of
by the way,
totally, it's part of like, so
That's
it's
right.
part of his thing. He's never saying we need to go change this. He's just saying, man, I'm bitter about this.
it's like by the way, he did this in life when
Yeah.
the Katrina thing
Yeah.
with when he was standing next to Mike Myers, where he just remember where he goes, George Bush don't care about black people. It's like. I mean, it's a whole other
Which
level.
is shocking to
Right.
see
Which was
where
a-
he's
which was a
ended
good
up in
point.
life,
Which was a good point. I
where
think
who
that
he's
was one of-
backing now. I can't.
I know.
I know I said I wouldn't talk about it, but fuck.
No, it's all good. Ben, you said you had some notes about crack music, right?
Yes. So this song is, for me, right? When you have a hot drum sample, like that could totally make or break, that like changes the course of your song, right? So it's I could consider most of this album boom bap centric, meaning that it chops up old R&B and jazz drum samples, makes like a, from a break beat, if you will. This break beat, this drum sample is extremely complex. It's like almost like a funk professor's 4/4 beat. It's not a sample it's not that. You know what I mean? It's almost like a fusion jazz funk 4/4 beat, where it's staggered and it's extremely, it's like if you were going to go see like a funk fusion band, what a drummer might do. So I love that. And it gives a feeling of like a frenetic energy to the song that wouldn't be there if it was just a straightforward 4/4 beat. I think it's funny that the game is
he's just in a chorus.
they say featuring the game. I'm like, oh wow, the game has a verse. That's one of my pet peeves in hip hop in general, is when they say featuring an artist and they just say a sentence and like that's your feature. Like, come on, man.
I know.
Why is that even featuring the game?
Game is dope.
The only thing I don't like more than that is when they say featuring and it's an artist that passed away years before the song was recorded. That song ain't featuring anyone, man.
That's funny. Yeah, it's funny that first of all, yeah, it's one of like probably the top 3, top 4 beats on the album. I agree. This beat is ridiculous. I focus on the lyrics a little bit too. I was comparing basically he's comparing crack to hip hop. Like he's saying like this is the new wave hip hop, and it's like
keeps fiends coming back, man.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. He's like modern hip hop is basically saturated with bullshit. And it's so much product in the market. Like it's hard to tell what's initially whack and what's not. Just like crack, it's like, but it doesn't matter because at that point you're addicted. So here, take it. You know what I mean?
And I think his argument is that like the real crack music, like when someone like it's a common thread in hip hop, when something's crack music, it means it's something that's so good that people fiend for
exactly.
it more and more. And that's, I think, the metaphor he's going with. It's great. I like this song. I like this beat.
Also, there's a line in here that is this is one of the other sort of foreshadowing lines. It's interesting. He's talking about Jay-Z. He goes, because dreams of being Hova went from being a broke man to being an adult man to being the president. Look, there's hope, man. He's talking about Jay-Z being the president of Rockefeller, and he was a drug dealer and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But and this is crazy. I'm not saying he actually did this because no one's an actual Nostradamus and can predict the future. But those lines could also easily be attributed to Obama. Went from being a broke man. Not that Obama was ever like in the slums, but he didn't grow up a wealthy person at all.
He didn't grow up well, sure.
To be an adult man, he didn't sell crack, but he smoked weed. Like he's public in the fact that he used to smoke weed. To being the president, look, there's hope, man. Hope was his tagline. So again,
you might say this inspired Obama.
I love that.
Hey,
I like when Professor Dion shows his. I like that, man.
It's just eerie. It's fucking eerie.
Yeah,
that's good.
Sure.
Anything else on crack music?
No. Nope.
All right.
I think that those were my takes from this album. That's what I wrote. That's the extent of my notes. And listen, I could have listened to this another 4 times and probably come up with more to say. I was mostly moved by the production. I think its sound, and it doesn't. Before I realized that there was another man on this, like another main contributor to the arrangements and the production, I thought, man, like, I can't believe Kanye did this on his own. Like, that was my first, like, I can't believe, like, this, that, like, how did he sample those strings?
Right.
But then I realized someone arranged, there was string arrangements put in, you know what I mean? And I think that's what makes this album pretty special to me, is it's a dynamic and pretty involved achievement. And that, you know, I'll probably come back to it for the sonic value
Sure.
and appreciation. Yeah.
The only other deep thing I wanted to get into, I teased earlier that there's a big hint on this album as to why Kanye sort of, you know, lost his mind later on.
Yeah.
And that hint is in the song "Hey Mama." So it's obviously it's one of the two. I feel like this album has two sort of like beautiful songs to them, right? That are they're hip hop, but they're like, you know, they're, you know, it has more melody. The message is more like sort of soft, and like it's almost, they're more like art pieces. It's this and Roses. Roses is like it starts off as like, you know, kind of a depressing song, but like a realistic take. Like the line that always got me was the last line of the first verse, where it's like he's in the doctor's room, sorry, the hospital room with his aunt that's dying, and the nurse is coming up to him asking for autographs, his t-shirt. It's like, yeah, it's like a reality of being a celebrity, right? It's like you don't realize, like, yo, you don't see that we're fucking about to mourn our aunt, you're gonna ask me for autographs right now. Like, interesting shit. But like the whole album, the song ends at a positive note. The grandma recovers and everything like that. But Hey Mama is the other one where I think it's just a very beautiful song. Homage to his mom, obviously, and I think it pretty obviously pays homage to Dear Mama by Tupac. And before I get into how it affected him later, in continuing with the theme of this song, I think this and why this song towards the end of the album, he's sort of looking at his like rap heroes like Tupac and Nas. Nas also had a song about his mom called Dance. I feel like this is like in his mentality. He's like, all right, now I'm at the pinnacle of where I want to be. Like I'm exactly where my heroes are. Like, I'm gonna make a song now about my mom, because Nas did when he was on top, Tupac did when he was on top, and now,
You know when that Nas song dropped?
I'm thinking about it now. As I've been talking, I'm thinking, was it dropped after this? It might have been after this. I thought
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Is it from? It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Regardless,
right. But the song in general, it's crucial. It's crucial because you know, it shows his love for his mom, right? Like he even though his parents divorced, he still had a relationship and has a relationship with his father. So it's not, you know, like a deadbeat dad or anything like that. But he was a mama's boy, right? He lived with his mom since they divorced when he was 3 years old. Mom's a very smart woman, took care of him, provided all that stuff. When he made this song, he actually debuted it on the Oprah Winfrey Show with his mom right there. So he played it for her. Like, you know, she loved it so much right away. She made it her ringtone. You know, like, so clearly he was very, very close with his mom. This album was made in 2005. Kanye's mom passed away 2 years later, in 2007, in a freak plastic surgery accident. She had a heart attack while she was having a plastic surgery. So very, very, very tragic. Like really, really sad. I always said that his mom's death was the catalyst for his behavior later on in life, because I think he was so close to his mom when he lost that rock. And on top of that, you know, who knows? Like, she was a professor, but it's not like she was like rich. Like, she probably wouldn't have gotten plastic surgery if her son wasn't successful, right? So he's probably looking in his head like, oh fuck, like my success is the reason that my mom got the plastic surgery, and her death was a result of the plastic surgery. So I think. I've had people that sort of agree with me on this. I think his mom's death fucked him up, and I think he sort of partially blames himself for his mom's death. And if you look at like where he started acting sort of erratic, it was exactly after 2007. It was right when his mom died. So the reason I say that this song's a hint is because it really goes to show, like, before any of that, like, it, you know, before the mom died, he has a dedication song to his mom, just to show like, yo, I'm so close to this woman. I'm gonna put a track dedicated, like almost end my sophomore album that's gonna be a hit, and have a track solely dedicated to her. Debut in Oprah. I love this woman. Blah blah blah. She's my rock. And then 2 years later, she's gone. So
it's an interesting, not argument, but, you know, like, assessment. And hey, it could be true. My only take or comment is, you know, I don't know if he had a history of mental illness before.
Sure.
I don't know what the extent and truth is behind his current mental illness, but, you know, I'm sure, you know, and all I know is what I see. I can only speak on what I see, and what I see is a man who took every advantage of this And like, I think I like, if you think the fact that he's in headlines for his erratic behavior isn't his choice, and isn't his decision to like exploit, or not exploit, but to it was planned. It just, everything feels so about the headline that like people could slip into mental illness in a very private way, even at his level of fame. They could just choose to be quiet about it, whereas he wanted the whole world to see him that way, and it was dollar motivated, in my opinion. And
just thinking about the situation we're all in right now, right? We're recording this in the middle of coronavirus lockdown, right? Or I don't know if we're in the middle, but it feels like it's been going on forever. And one of the impacts a lot of people are feeling, I certainly am, is just a lack of like feedback from society. Is my behavior
connection.
Absolutely nuts? Right? Am I being extreme? I don't know. I have a feeling that because of how talented he is, and how it kind of disconnects him a little bit. And maybe if his mother didn't pass away, he wouldn't be making, sneakers that look like a crumpled up piece of paper, or like, or wearing Trump gear, going to the White House, meeting with this guy, whatever. But yeah, to Ben's point, I think he would be doing scandalous things anyway, because that's his approach to fame. And that's why he's so relevant.
It feels very calculated. Even if he has mental illness, it feels everything we hear about feels like he really wants us to hear about it, so that the next album drop is as successful as possible.
This isn't meant to sound like a cop out, but
even the Trump stuff, honestly.
Fair. But
definitely the Trump stuff.
All I'll say is, like, can it be both?
Yeah,
it could very well be both.
It could totally be both.
You know what I mean?
But that's what I'm saying. The choice of what to do with mental illness.
Sure.
I don't know. I'm coming off, and I know I sound this way, as a bitter, judgmental hater. And I have, when it comes to Kanye West, admittedly, I have drank the haterade. I've got, I've died and gone to Hades, and like, it's just my own trip that I'm on, so everything, you have to realize, to anyone listening, everything that I'm saying is layered with my own judgment and my own shortcomings of like not much caring for, the whole Kanye narrative.
Fair enough.
So like, my apologies to anyone. I don't mean to sound so bitter.
Yeah,
and I'm trying.
Benny, can I make a counter to your haterade?
Yes,
right. Because like I see those points, I think they're good points, and I feel that, but there is something outstanding. Kanye West is somebody who's like touched, right? Like some of the other people that, some of the other artists that we've talked about their work, guys touched,
No doubt.
like watch I've watched videos of him that he put out deliberately, sure, but like of him improvising his way with his church group to making music. And the guy is so talented. What he creates just on the spot. I mean, the guy is a
mega talent.
Totally, right? It's such a rare talent that he has developed and perfected in some ways, right? That continues to evolve. That makes it makes him one of the most talented people in the world, in my eyes.
Extremely gifted, and an enormous. I agree. Just an enormous talent, and a songwriter too. That's what separates him, I'd say, from a multitude of other rap stars, is that he has the songwriter's gene. Whereas a lot of rap people link up with a hot producer, they know how to kick game, and maybe the stars align for them and they get radio play. Whereas there was no stopping the world from knowing who Kanye West was. He is an immense, naturally gifted songwriter. So no doubt.
And I guess I'll before I get, I'm assuming, we'll do sort of wind down, close out, but a couple of really quick notes before we do that. We didn't touch on the Nas song, and we didn't go into details. It was a really good song, great verse from Nas. But interesting that Jay-Z and Nas were still beefing at the time. And
was this before Nas signed to Def Jam?
Yes, in fact, Jay-Z had no idea that that not only was Kanye putting a Nas song on this album, but that it would follow the song that Jay-Z's on. It's the very next fucking track. Jay-Z had no idea.
I had every assumption just listening to this that this was post Ether. I mean, obviously post Ether, but like post them reconciling, because I know that Jay-Z appeared on Black Republicans,
Mm.
which is a great song on Hip Hop Is Dead, the Nas album.
Yeah.
And so like I didn't realize that this was before that.
I think this song was like sort of the catalyst that got Jay-Z to sort of stop, or to get the two of them to stop the beef. I believe that Jay-Z, once he heard it, I don't think he was pissed or anything. He actually publicly praised the verse. And I think that was the first time in their like, beefing that he actually said something positive about Nas. And I think that was sort of like got their relationship going. And then, Hip Hop Is Dead came out in 2006. So
Wow.
this was the thing. This song, this verse was the thing that got Nas and Jay-Z's relationship repaired.
That I did
Crazy,
not
right?
realize that. That is balls on Kanye's part.
Balls, right?
Yeah.
And then the other thing, this is as pointed, but just funny that on the song "Bring Me Down" with Brandy, Brandy's brother, of course, is the one that helped make Kanye's future wife famous because
that is
crazy, right?
So Ray J.
Ray J and Kim Kardashian are the ones that had the sex tape. That's what made Kim Kardashian famous. Kanye is now married to Kim Kardashian, but in 2005,
do you think he has any regrets on who he featured on this album? I mean, say what you want about the man, but he's got to have some element of pride, or that like looks back and goes, "Oh my god." Wish I could have got a different R&B chick on this.
But ultimately, I think we basically said it all. I mean, I'm first and foremost, I'm actually really happy that that Ben had a little bit more respect for this album than he did going into it, which is exactly all I wanted. I didn't expect you to love this album. I didn't even really expect you to like it. I just wanted you to hear it, just so that you could hear what I've been hearing all these years, and just say, hey, at least this is a better album than I expected. The beats are great, and I respect it.
On that note, and this will be my closing statement, is while I don't think I'm gonna really bump this all the time, right? Like there have been albums by some of my favorite artists that maybe I like more and I'll listen to more that I wasn't like, wow. And I said wow to myself several times during the 2 times I listened to this album. And so like just the ability to impress me on that level, it's an impressive and like undeniably complete and actualized vision, so I really was thoroughly impressed, and I'm glad this was like a growing experience for me, Dion.
That's all I wanted, man. That's all I wanted.
I grew a little spiritually.
Gary, got any final thoughts?
No, said it all.
Said it all.
But I do have I wanted to get into the album for next week.
Yes, let's hear it.
Yeah, and before we might, I'm going to ask that we pause the recording for a second, or cut this out later, because we got to have a powwow.
We'll cut it out.
We got to have a powwow. I can't tyrant so hard and spring this on you, right? Justin Bieber, no, I can't spring this on you without first discussing it. Okay, now, I think of. Remember that De La Soul album that Benny you gave me and I bootlegged onto a CD when we were in high school. Stakes is High, with all the like weird with the weird like static at the end of each track because I screwed up burning it. That I thought was part of the album for the longest time. That's right.
36 Chambers for years, the only copy I had. Each track ended with the skips. I thought it was part of the album too.
I thought it was part of the album. I'm like, damn, this is an interesting feature of the album. I've since purchased De La Soul's music and etc.
Like, what the hell?
Oh, wait. This is great. So where are you going with this, Gary?
So where I'm going with this is the opening of that album. When I first heard
Criminal Minded.
That's right.
Criminal Minded?
I was going to go to Criminal Minded.
Yo!
This is going to be great.
So here's why I wanted to ask you guys, right? Because Criminal Minded, I don't know how hard you've bumped that album or if you have it all, because it's very specific to a point in time in the 80s.
Extremely 80s.
And it's super raw. And there's just so much music that KRS-One made later that we could talk about, like Return.
If we're gonna talk KRS-One, it should be Criminal Minded.
Yeah. All right. If you guys are down with Criminal Minded, I want to talk about Criminal Minded.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it. This is gonna be a really good one. Thank you, Gary. And thanks for reminding me how terrible my CD burner was. I remember thinking that, like the first time Dion, the first time I heard 36 Chambers was a burned copy.
I think it was Philly Blunt. I think it was Philly Blunt's burnt copy.
Philly Blunt's burned copy, and after every track it skipped, I'm like, this is interesting. Then when I listened to that Stakes is High, and it was skipping at the end of that, I'm like, man, like this is a theme in the '90s. But then I realized I'm a bum, and
Criminal Minded is more, it's the opposite of the album that we just went through, which is why it appeals to me as the next choice, right? Because it is raw. Yeah. It's elemental.
Very nice juxtaposition. I
love
like
it.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, guys, you've been listening to Do It Yourself, Music Appreciation. Hope you enjoyed it. If you want to listen to Criminal Minded before our next episode, feel free. Join us for the ride. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Peace.
Peace.